Welcome to another session. I hope you are well. In today's session, I want to talk about denials and addiction. I'll use myself as a preface. I think this will be um, the right way to start for a number of reasons. Firstly, I want to show you how I was also in denial. I go back, say, about 15 plus years, the life I have lived over the past, say, 15 years. And for the bulk majority of that period, I have been addicted to things. If you were to have asked me at any time in that 15-year period or 15 to 20-year period, what are your addictions? My response would have been nothing, and I would have been sincere uh, in my response. But you see, sincerity is not a test of truth. Some people can be very sincere, um, but be unaware. Ignorance, as I said before, is the major cause of most of human suffering. Sometimes we just do not know. But if I play perhaps a brief tape of what my day-to-day addictions consisted of, I think most of you will recognize it in your respective lives. Maybe not to the same extent. I've always been very active from a physical perspective, sports, etc. And I used to train a lot. I used to work a lot. And I rarely slept. For much of my life, I'd say from maybe about age 20 up until my 40s, 5 hours, 6 hours of sleep was perhaps all that I had. Very busy, worked very long hours, but had other activities that kept me very busy. My breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, and what I had in between for snacks or treats contained my addictions. In many ways, I would start by saying this, that there is a correlation and a strong connection between your diet and your addictions. There is also a connection between your lifestyle and your addictions. And unfortunately, that manifests itself in other ways. It might be psychological, relational, it might even be physical. I would wake up in the morning, to give you a good example, and I would have my first thing in the morning. I have orange juice. I never really was into coffee, and then I would have with my orange juice a bowl of porridge and milk, and 2 hours later on, I would have an oats bar, and about 2.5 hours after that, I would have a midday snack, and then about 2 hours after that, I would have my lunch, and it would be purely carb heavy. Yes, every now and then there'll be some protein and some fiber, and who knows, somewhere in between lunchtime and when I had to go to the gym, there might be an energy drink. I wasn't heavy on those, and for dinner it would be a combination of carbs, foods that have carbohydrates. For most people listening, you might be thinking, what is wrong with that? Well, I used to have what I call a sugar dump and a sugar high. I had to eat every 2 hours or 2.5 hours during the day to sustain my addiction. At the time, I didn't realize that it was an addiction. I would have a peak and then I would have a drop, obviously, a sugar dump, and I'd have to get something back into my system to get me back to where I was. My issue was so pernicious that at night, just before I was going to bed, I would have a banana or an apple or some treat next to my bed, because I knew it was like a clock that I would wake up at roughly 1 or 2 in the morning hungry, and I had to eat something in order to go back to sleep, and I would eat and I would go back to sleep. In the past year or so, I have come to look back, obviously, by seeking and finding new knowledge. I've come across a new way of thinking about how the human body should work, going back as to how we did things from a primitive perspective. And as I look back at how I lived, I would say I had some denials. Uh, and I would say I had addictions. My addictions were hidden in my diet, sometimes my lifestyle. So let me pose a question to you and start today's session as follows, recognizing that I am saying, yes, we are all addicted to something. Food, lifestyle, sometimes drugs, whatever it might be. And whatever we are addicted to is playing a part in shaping how we are in life. How does your day start? That's the question. And how does your day progress? And how does your day end? If your day starts off with morning coffee or orange juice or some sugar drink, if your day starts off by you having some form of porridge, Weetabix with milk, if your day progresses into you having a carb-heavy lunch or an energy drink, or midway through the day, the need for another cup of coffee, something to give you that boost, or an energy drink. And also if your day starts to end by you seeking alcohol, maybe sitting in your living room, in your lounge, having crisps, or just having a carb-heavy dinner, then you will find that what you have is a blueprint for an addiction. If your day also consists of, the occasional or the regular intake of smoking cigarettes or smoking a joint, sometimes even taking cocaine, all of these things, taken to the excess level, taken in a certain level of a frequency and repetition or intensity, forms a habit which we become addicted to. We all have what I call the addiction ladder, especially in the West. If you think about the average person born in the West, pre-birth, you have a mother who has, let me use a good example. 2 weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a very lovely young man who is expecting his first child. And I inquired about the mother and the baby to be, and he said, well, the baby and the mother are going through a sugar craving. The missus just cannot satiate her sugar cravings, and she just keeps eating. She's due shortly. She just keeps having food that contains so much sugar because she seems to have this craving. Well, the key thing in that conversation was, or the statement was, babies don't get to choose pre-birth, especially what they eat. Whatever the mother eats, the baby actually consumes. So pre-birth, we have mothers on sugar cravings. When the baby is born, we then put the baby on some form of formula milk. The baby is therefore in a constant need of sugar. Now we see this in young boys and girls today. We don't see this as much in those who were, you might say, parents who were baby boomers or prior. The addiction ladder therefore starts with sugar and milk, but it doesn't stay there. It moves on to fruits, like I mentioned in my case. Now as babies, we wean babies on banana, we wean babies on the stewed apple, and we wean babies on things that contain too much sugar. Fruit sugar therefore becomes more pernicious than most of the other sugars because it seems natural. Now I remember, if I look back at my time, I would say, well, I'm eating healthy. I am following the recommended your 5 a day. You had to have the orange juice, and you had to have this, and you had to have that. And that was the general wisdom at the time. Mothers are taught and told this is what is useful for you pre-birth, during pregnancy, and post. And so mothers feed their children what we are told by those who are supposed to be, you might call them the high priests, the medical professionals who are supposed to know more than we do. In addition to what we eat, we've then combined that with a lifestyle. Social media plays a role, becomes an addiction. It takes away our focus from things that are more edifying. And if we're not careful, like any tool, with electricity, I can make a meal, but also with electricity, I can kill a person. It's all about how you use it. And what we tend to find, and this is the key part of today's session, is that because we are all addicted to something, some people to a much higher extent than others, we try to mask symptoms. One of the reasons we mask symptoms is that so we come across as having more energy. For example, let me use myself. I ate regularly because I realized that my energy levels were dropping and I had to stay on form. There were times when I worked 18, 16 hours a day. You need energy. We talked about energy entry, energy exit, energy production, energy delivery, energy consumption. And if you are always in a deficit state, it was not a good thing. So my addictions were driven by my desire to have a positive energy balance. Some other people, sometimes, myself included, we will have things, food, drinks, or consume substances that gave us that false energy, that made us feel gregarious and outgoing and extroverted and interesting and fun to be around. And think about this. You've come back from work, you've done 8 hours of the day, you've traveled for 2 hours back and forth from work. At 6 p.m. you're tired, you're knackered. But you would like to go to the gym, someone calls you and says, are you coming to the gym? And you think, I just don't have the energy. And they say, come on now, come on, why don't you just take a Red Bull? So you take a Red Bull and suddenly you get that sugar spike and you feel awake. You go, you train, and you train really well. For 90 minutes, you have energy. And then there's a dump again. We do things using food, using our diet, using substances, using our lifestyle to create this false illusion that we have energy and we want to be sociable. Unfortunately, done to the extreme, what we find is it starts to manifest itself in the form of depression. For some people, we control our distress and symptoms with cigarette smoking. For some people, it's prescribed drugs. For some other people, it's illegal drugs. For some other people, it's what we call food, which in many cases, considering the consistency and the intensity of the food consumption, particularly in this case, carbohydrates and sugars, is more pernicious, it's worse. And so what we find is that over time, we live in a state of denial. And when I started today's session, I suspect when you saw the word or you heard me say the word denial, you would have been like I was in the past, where you say, I don't have any addictions. And possibly, prior to my knowledge and understanding of what an addiction entails and covers, I would have said, I don't have any addictions. You too would have been right, could be right. But when you increase and broaden the definition of what an addiction is, what you might also find is that perhaps, just perhaps, there is an addiction. That addiction, for people who suffer from depression, is rooted in as a symptom. It's not the root cause, but it plays a significant part in making sure that you do not grow, you do not become your best, and you do not have a fulfilled life. So, in trying to identify and solve the whole issue about depression and anxiety and fatigue, we go back to your diet, we go back to your lifestyle, we go back to what you consume. And hidden in what you consume, if you could make a list of everything you have every day, you will find there are things that you are doing to yourself by virtue of what you feed yourself that are creating not a causal link, but a high index of correlation between how you are and how you feel and what you're consuming. We all have addictions. What we try to do is to reduce our dependency on any one particular substance or item. For some people, for example, here's a good one as I close. If I were to ask you a simple question, look at the entire day. What is it in your day that you cannot live without? For some people, now think about this is fascinating. Some people wake up at 7 a.m. and they cannot function, and they say so, I cannot function until I have had my coffee. I don't even see my husband or my wife or the children. I can't deal with work until I have coffee. These same people have had 8 hours of sleep, so the body has been rested. At the point when the body should have the most amount of energy, we are taking coffee because the body cannot kickstart the day and move into full flow. So for some people, they say, well, I need to have 2 or 3 coffees in the day to get through my working day. That's an addiction. For some other people, it's just simply the energy drinks, the sports drinks, the boosts. They can't get through the day without that surge of sugar. For some other people, it might be alcohol. I can't go out in the evening. I can't have any form of entertainment. I can't actually socialize until I have a pint or 2. For some other people, is they can't start the day until they have a cigarette. For some people, they function the best when they have a spliff. We all have addictions. The question is, how can we start to reduce or exchange a bad addiction for a healthy addiction? Now, keep this in mind. As I move forward, I'm going to talk about exercise and how important exercise is for mental health, depression, anxiety. If you imagine the space that I am in currently is light. The reason it's light is not because there is natural light at this particular time in question. If I was to shut all the windows, it would still be light. Why? Because there's artificial lighting in the space. The way we get the light to leave is by switching off the light. When we do so, darkness sets in. The way we get darkness to leave is by turning on the light. Darkness is always present, but light displaces darkness. We call that the law of displacement. So the way you get one habit to change is to replace a habit with another. You can't get rid of a thought, but you can move towards another thought. You can't get rid of a habit just by will, choice, or just by proclamations. The best way to, and the most effective way to get rid of a habit is not by stopping the habit, is by providing an alternative habit that displaces the old habit and ensures that you keep the old habit away. Which is why for most people, when they stop smoking, they need something to displace the old habit. It could be exercise, it could be a different lifestyle, it could be different substances. The key thing to keep in mind is as we move forward is how do you replace a bad habit with a good habit? Now, I hope today's session has been useful.